All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into some news coming out of North Korea.
Oh, yeah.
Kim Jong Un just announced that he's implementing the toughest anti-US policy yet. And this comes right as Trump is getting ready to head back into the White House.
Yeah.
We've got a whole bunch of news articles from sources like AP News to try to unpack this and to get a better sense of the public reaction. We're even going to look at some Reddit threads.
Sounds good. It's certainly a fascinating time to be looking at this, especially considering the history between Kim Jong Un and Trump.
You're telling me, right? I mean, they had those 3 meetings back in the day.
Yeah.
Those nuclear talks that stalled out.
Yeah.
And then there was that whole falling in love comment.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
But before we get too sidetracked by all the antics of the past, let's try to focus on this announcement.
Sure.
The sources we're looking at all mention that this announcement came at the end of a big 5-day meeting of the Workers' Party. So for those of us who, don't spend our days analyzing North Korean politics, can you give us a sense of what's the significance of this meeting? What is the Workers' Party all about?
So the Workers' Party, it's not just a political party in North Korea.
Okay.
It's really the core of the regime.
Ah.
They have their fingers in every pie, from the economy to the media.
Wow.
So anything that Kim Jong Un says at this meeting carries a lot of weight,
Okay.
both inside North Korea and for the rest of the world who's watching.
So it wasn't just like Kim Jong Un kind of thinking out loud or anything like that.
No.
It was a deliberate statement that he made.
Exactly. And it's important to think about this announcement in the context of Trump's upcoming term.
Right.
A lot of people are wondering, are they going to go back to this summit diplomacy thing that they had going on before?
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I think I tend to agree with you on that one. And I think some of the experts in these articles we're looking at also agree. But why do you think that is? Is it just because those past negotiations didn't go anywhere, or is there something else going on here?
Well, for one, Trump is probably going to be pretty busy
Yeah.
dealing with all kinds of other international crises.
Of course.
I mean, Ukraine's still a major issue.
Right.
The Middle East never really calms down.
Never a dull moment.
So North Korea might not be at the top of his to-do list.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I was also reading about another potential roadblock here, and that's that North Korea seems to be getting very friendly with Russia these days.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with everything that's going on in Ukraine.
You're hitting on a really crucial point there.
Okay.
The sources we're looking at point to a lot of evidence from U.S. intelligence to assessments from Ukraine and South Korea that North Korea is sending Russia military aid.
Like, what kind of aid are we talking about here?
We're talking more than 10,000 troops and a pipeline of weapons.
Wow. So
Yeah.
this is a pretty significant partnership then.
It is, and it really complicates the chances of the U.S. and North Korea sitting down to have any kind of productive dialogue.
Yeah, I can see how that would make things tricky.
Yeah, the worry is that Russia might start giving North Korea advanced weapons technology
Oh,
in return for their help in Ukraine.
that can't be good.
No, it could even help them build more powerful nukes,
Oh, wow.
which would be a whole other level of alarming.
Yeah, that's starting to sound a little scary.
Yeah, and then you have Zelensky's statement,
Right.
claiming that 3,000 North Korean troops have already been killed or wounded fighting in the Kursk region in Russia.
Oh, wow.
So this isn't just a theoretical alliance, it's actually having real-world consequences.
So it's like, on one hand, we've got Kim Jong Un taking this really aggressive stance toward the U.S.
Right.
On the other hand, Trump is back in the picture, and now North Korea is tangled up in this whole thing with Russia.
Yeah,
It really feels like some geopolitical thriller in the making.
it really does. It's a very complicated situation. And if we really want to make sense of this toughest anti-U.S. policy, I think we need to try to see things from Kim Jong Un's perspective.
Right, because, I mean, a leader's actions are usually more than just what we see on the surface, right?
Exactly.
There are often a lot of deeper reasons driving those choices.
Precisely. So
Yeah.
let's dig into that North Korean perspective next and try to understand what's going on.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me was from the AP article, Kim Jong Un called the U.S. the most reactionary state.
Oh, wow.
And he's saying that their core policy is anti-communism.
Yeah.
He even went so far as to say that the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are forming a nuclear military bloc for aggression.
Those are some pretty strong accusations.
He didn't hold back.
But, I mean, what do you think is fueling this perspective? Is it just propaganda? Is there, like, a historical basis for these beliefs?
It's definitely a combination of factors.
Yeah.
I think you can't ignore the fact that the Korean War never technically ended.
Oh, that's right.
It stopped with an armistice. It's not a peace treaty. So officially, they're still at war.
Wow.
Then on top of that, you've got decades of mistrust,
Right.
propaganda on both sides,
Okay.
this constant military tension between the two countries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a recipe for a very adversarial relationship.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how much history is there.
Yeah.
And it's not just ancient history influencing this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, one of the articles mentioned a statement that Kim Jong Un made just last month,
Oh, yeah.
where he basically said that his talks with the U.S. just proved that they were hostile
Right.
and that building up his nuclear arsenal is the only way to protect North Korea.
I think you're right. It seems like from Kim Jong Un's perspective,
Yeah.
he sees it all about survival,
Okay.
not about aggression.
Right.
He sees the U.S. and its allies as a very real threat.
Yeah.
And nuclear weapons are basically his insurance policy.
It's like this vicious cycle, right?
Yeah,
One side feels threatened, so they build up their defenses,
exactly.
which then makes the other side feel even more threatened.
And so on and so forth.
You've just described the security dilemma, which is basically what's been happening with the U.S. and North Korea for decades now.
That makes sense. But before we get totally lost in all the geopolitical stuff here,
Sure.
we mentioned those Reddit threads earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really curious to hear what regular people are saying about all this.
I am too.
There are some interesting reactions in here.
Really?
I mean, some people are making jokes about, what impact this might have on the meth trade,
Oh, wow.
which I guess is one way to cope with all the tension.
Yeah.
But others are expressing some real concern about the possibility of conflict breaking out.
Yeah.
Someone even compared Kim Jong Un and Trump to kids with Napoleon syndrome,
Oh, wow.
which I think kind of speaks to a real fear that their egos are driving things more than any sort of rational diplomacy.
I think you're right. I think even though some of those comments might seem a little outlandish on the surface,
Yeah.
they do reflect a genuine anxiety about this situation.
And the uncertainty of what might happen next.
And it's not just anonymous Reddit users who are worried about this.
Yeah.
I mean, all the sources mention that the international community is paying close attention to what North Korea is doing,
Yeah.
especially those missile tests and the aggressive rhetoric.
They have every reason to be concerned. I mean, North Korea's nuclear ambitions are a real threat
Right.
to stability in the region.
Yeah, but I mean, what can the international community even do about this? It seems like their options are pretty limited.
Well, the problem is that Russia and China keep blocking any attempts
Oh, yeah.
at stronger sanctions.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, they have vetoed power in the UN Security Council.
Right.
So that really creates this diplomatic gridlock.
Ah.
It's really hard to put any meaningful pressure on North Korea
Oh, okay.
when you have these two major powers who are essentially shielding them.
So basically, we've got Kim Jong Un, who feels cornered,
Yeah.
believes that nukes are his only guarantee of security,
Right.
and he's facing very little international pressure.
To change course.
It's not a good combination.
It's a pretty volatile situation.
Yeah, but I think if we kind of connect all these different pieces together,
Yeah.
I think a few key takeaways start to emerge.
What are those?
Well, first of all, I think it's clear that Kim Jong Un's toughest anti-U.S. policy is more than just empty threats.
Okay.
It's really rooted in how he sees the world
Mm-hmm.
and his belief that North Korea needs nuclear weapons in order to survive.
That makes sense.
And the second takeaway, I think, is that any path toward a diplomatic solution
yeah,
is going to be incredibly complicated,
it sounds like it.
especially with Trump back in the White House.
Yeah.
And North Korea strengthening its ties with Russia.
It's a mess.
And to add one more layer of complexity,
Oh, God.
the international community's ability to influence North Korea's behavior is very limited,
Right.
thanks to kind of the way the world is right now.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What are the options
Yeah.
for preventing this from escalating into something even more dangerous? Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It really is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, with all these factors that we've been talking about swirling around,
Yeah.
what can the international community actually do to try and prevent this whole thing from getting even worse?
There are no easy answers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But even with all the tension and the mistrust,
Right.
I think it all comes back to one thing: dialogue.
Okay.
We can't just let things sit and fester.
Right.
That's how little misunderstandings
Yeah.
turn into something a lot worse.
I get that, but I mean, how do you even begin a dialogue when one side is absolutely convinced that they're under attack, that nuclear weapons are their only lifeline, and they're cozying up to a country that's actively at war?
Yeah.
It just seems impossible.
It's a monumental challenge. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But I think if you look back at history, you can see that seemingly impossible conversations can happen
Okay.
through things like back channels and informal talks,
Right.
even small confidence-building measures.
Okay.
Sometimes it's about finding these tiny little cracks
Yeah.
in this wall of mistrust
Yeah.
and just slowly, carefully widening them.
So instead of trying to force a grand solution right away,
Right.
it's about taking those smaller steps that could eventually lead to something bigger.
Exactly.
Okay.
And maybe, just maybe along the way,
Yeah.
we can start to address North Korea's security concerns without compromising the safety of its neighbors in the world.
Right. It's definitely a very delicate situation.
It's a tightrope walk, that's for sure.
It really is. It's like this toughest anti-U.S. policy from Kim Jong Un.
Yeah.
It feels both genuine and strategic at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, his words might reflect how he genuinely sees the world,
Right.
but it also seems like a way for him to project power, scare off those he sees as enemies,
Yeah.
and ultimately just ensure that his regime survives.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Oh, okay.
And that's what makes this situation so complex
Mhm.
and potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
We need to take his words seriously.
Okay.
Try to understand what's motivating him.
Right.
And keep those lines of communication open, no matter how difficult it gets.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
I mean, we started with Kim Jong Un's announcement and then unpacked all these different layers.
Yeah.
Trump coming back into the picture, North Korea's ties to Russia,
Right?
the international community struggling to figure out how to respond.
It's complicated.
It really is, and it's clear there are no easy answers.
Absolutely not. But understanding the history,
Yeah.
the key players,
Right.
and the different perspectives at play, I think is really crucial.
Okay.
Hopefully this can contribute to a more informed
Yeah.
and nuanced conversation about North Korea and what the future might hold.
I agree. And for those of you listening out there,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Do you think there's a path towards de-escalation and dialogue with North Korea? Or is the world headed for another era of tension and confrontation?
That's a good question.
Keep exploring this topic. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
And until next time, stay curious.